Marcus Iron Fist Rodriguez had everything a man could want. At 28 years old, he was the undefeated heavyweight champion of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. His record stood at 35 wins and 0 losses. Every fight ended the same way, with his opponent on the ground and Marcus standing victorious with his arms raised high. The money flowed like water. His bank account had more zeros than most people could count. Luxury cars filled his garage. A mansion in Beverly Hills served as his home. Beautiful women surrounded him at every party. Magazine covers featured his face monthly. Social media followers numbered in the millions. Everyone wanted to be near the great Marcus Rodriguez. But success had changed Marcus in ways he didn't realize. The constant praise and easy victories had inflated his ego beyond measure. He began to believe he was invincible. No challenge seemed too great. No opponent too strong. In his mind, he had become more than human. He was a fighting god. The transformation showed in how he treated others. Restaurant staff trembled when he complained about his food. Gym partners feared sparring with him because of his aggressive nature. Even his own trainer walked on eggshells around the champion. Marcus enjoyed the fear and respect his presence commanded. It made him feel powerful and important. His latest victory had been particularly brutal. The challenger, a respected former champion, lasted only 90 seconds in the ring. Marcus had landed a devastating combination that sent the man to the hospital. Instead of showing concern, Marcus celebrated wildly. He mocked his fallen opponent during the post-fight interview. The crowd booed, but Marcus didn't care. He believed their disapproval came from jealousy of his greatness. After the fight, Marcus decided to take a vacation. He chose London, England, attracted by the city's reputation and history. His manager booked him into the most expensive hotel in the city. A private jet carried him across the Atlantic Ocean. Upon landing, a limousine waited to transport him through the busy streets of London. The city fascinated Marcus, despite his arrogant attitude. Ancient buildings stood next to modern skyscrapers. Double-decker buses carried tourists and locals alike. The accents of the people amused him. He spent his first few days visiting famous landmarks and expensive restaurants. Everywhere he went, people recognized him. Some asked for autographs, others simply stared in amazement. On his 4th day in London, Marcus decided to visit Buckingham Palace. He had heard about the famous royal guards who stood motionless outside the palace gates. Stories described them as highly trained soldiers who never moved or spoke while on duty. Marcus found this concept ridiculous. In his opinion, real men didn't stand around like statues. Real men fought and conquered their enemies. The taxi dropped him off near the palace gates. Crowds of tourists gathered around the iconic building, taking pictures and admiring the architecture. Marcus pushed through the people, his large frame clearing a path easily. He wore an expensive designer tracksuit and gold jewelry that caught the sunlight. Several tourists recognized him and began taking photos. At the palace gates, Marcus saw his first royal guard. The man stood perfectly still, wearing the traditional red uniform and tall black hat. His rifle rested against his shoulder in the ceremonial position. The guard's face showed no expression. His eyes stared straight ahead, ignoring the crowds of people around him. Marcus studied the guard with growing amusement. The man appeared to be in good physical condition, but Marcus doubted he possessed real fighting skills. How dangerous could someone be who spent their days standing motionless? In Marcus's world, fighters moved constantly, looking for openings and weaknesses in their opponents. This guard seemed like an easy target. The crowd around Marcus grew larger as more people recognized the famous fighter. They whispered excitedly about his presence at the palace. Some asked him questions about his upcoming fights. Others requested selfies with the champion. Marcus enjoyed the attention, but his focus remained on the motionless guard. An idea began forming in Marcus's mind. What if he could prove how superior he was to these so-called elite guards? What if he could show the world that real fighting skills trumped ceremonial training? The thought excited him. He imagined the viral videos that would spread across social media. The headlines would read about the day an MMA champion showed up the British Royal Guards. Marcus approached the guard slowly, his confidence building with each step. The crowd followed him, sensing something interesting was about to happen. Phone cameras appeared everywhere, ready to capture whatever would unfold. Marcus smiled at the attention. He lived for moments like these when all eyes focused on him. Standing directly in front of the guard, Marcus began his psychological warfare. He made faces and gestures trying to get a reaction. The guard remained perfectly still, his training evident in his discipline. This only frustrated Marcus more. He was used to opponents who showed fear or anger before fights. This man's calmness seemed unnatural. "You think you're tough, standing there like a robot?" Marcus said loudly, ensuring the crowd could hear him. "I bet you've never been in a real fight in your life. All that fancy uniform can't hide the fact that you're just playing dress-up." The guard continued staring straight ahead, his expression unchanged. His breathing remained steady and controlled. Not even a muscle twitched in response to Marcus's taunts. The crowd grew larger and more excited, sensing drama building between the famous fighter and the silent soldier. Marcus's frustration increased with each passing moment. He was accustomed to getting reactions from people. Fear, anger, respect. Something always showed on their faces when he confronted them. This guard's complete lack of response felt like a personal insult to the champion's reputation. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky as the confrontation continued. More tourists gathered, creating a large semicircle around Marcus and the guard. The atmosphere grew tense with anticipation. Everyone could feel that something significant was about to happen, though nobody could predict exactly what that would be. Marcus decided to escalate his confrontation with the royal guard. The silent soldier's complete lack of reaction had wounded his pride deeply. In the fighting world, Marcus was used to immediate respect and fear. This guard's indifference felt like a direct challenge to everything Marcus believed about himself. "I'm talking to you, toy soldier," Marcus said, raising his voice even louder. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording every word. "Do you know who I am? I'm Marcus Rodriguez, the heavyweight champion of the world. I could drop you in 3 seconds if I wanted to." Still, the guard remained motionless. His eyes continued staring straight ahead, completely ignoring the famous fighter's presence. The discipline required for such control impressed some onlookers, but it only angered Marcus further. He interpreted the silence as disrespect and mockery. A tourist from America recognized Marcus and called out, "Hey, that's Iron Fist Rodriguez. He's never lost a fight." The crowd murmured with excitement. More people pulled out their phones to record the confrontation. Marcus felt energized by the recognition and attention. "That's right," Marcus announced to everyone around him. 35 wins, 0 losses. I've knocked out men twice this guard's size. I've made grown fighters cry like babies. And this guy thinks he can ignore me just because he wears a funny hat?" The royal guard's breathing remained steady and controlled. Sweat beaded on his forehead under the warm London sun, but he didn't wipe it away. His rifle stayed in the exact same position. His feet hadn't moved an inch since Marcus arrived. The level of self-discipline required for such stillness was extraordinary, but Marcus saw it differently. "Look at him," Marcus laughed, playing to his growing audience. "He's sweating like a pig but too scared to move. Probably afraid that if he budges even slightly, I'll knock his block off. Smart man, actually. He knows he can't handle a real fighter." An elderly British gentleman in the crowd spoke up. "Young man, these guards are highly trained soldiers. You shouldn't disrespect them like this." His accent was crisp and proper, clearly indicating education and class. Marcus turned toward the man with a condescending smile. "Trained in what? Standing still? Looking pretty for tourists? I'm trained to destroy people with my bare hands. There's a difference between playing soldier and being a real warrior." The old gentleman shook his head disapprovingly, but said nothing more. Several other British tourists looked uncomfortable with Marcus's behavior. However, many others seemed entertained by the spectacle, continuing to record everything on their phones. Marcus returned his attention to the guard, moving even closer. He now stood barely 2 feet away from the soldier. "I bet you're dying to take a swing at me," he taunted. "But you can't, can you? You're not allowed to move. You're trapped there like a statue while a real man disrespects you in front of all these people." The guard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It was such a small movement that most people missed it entirely. But Marcus caught it, and his eyes lit up with satisfaction. Finally, he had gotten some kind of reaction from the stoic soldier. "Oh, I saw that." Marcus grinned wickedly. "Your jaw clenched just a little bit. I'm getting under your skin, aren't I? You want to fight me so badly, but you can't because of your precious rules and regulations." What Marcus didn't understand was the true nature of the Royal Guard's training. These weren't ceremonial soldiers playing dress-up for tourists. They were active military personnel selected from elite regiments. Many had served in combat zones around the world. Their ability to remain motionless came from incredible mental discipline, not fear or weakness. The guard in question was Sergeant James Morrison of the Welsh Guards. He had completed 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. His military record included commendations for bravery under fire and exceptional marksmanship. Before joining the army, he had trained in several martial arts and boxing. Standing guard at Buckingham Palace was considered an honor, not a punishment. But Marcus knew none of this background. He saw only what appeared to be an easy target, a man forced to stand still while being insulted and threatened. The fighter's arrogance prevented him from recognizing the dangerous glint that had appeared in the guard's eyes. "Tell you what," Marcus announced loudly to ensure everyone could hear, "I'm feeling generous today. If this toy soldier wants to abandon his post and step away from his little sentry box, I'll give him a free lesson in what real fighting looks like." The crowd buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. This situation was escalating beyond simple taunting into something potentially serious. Several tourists began backing away, sensing that trouble might be brewing. A police officer who had been watching from a distance started walking toward the commotion. He moved casually, not wanting to create additional drama, but his intention was clear. The situation needed de-escalation before it got out of hand. Marcus noticed the approaching officer and felt a surge of urgency. He didn't want authorities to break up his show before he could prove his point. In his mind, he was about to demonstrate American fighting superiority over British military training. The viral video would make him even more famous. "Time's running out, soldier boy," Marcus said to the guard. "Last chance to show you got some backbone. Step away from your post and face me like a man. Unless you're too chicken to fight without your rifle." Sergeant Morrison's training warred with his personal feelings. Every fiber of his being wanted to teach this arrogant American a lesson in respect, but his duty required him to remain at his post regardless of provocation. The internal struggle was invisible to observers, masked by years of military discipline. The approaching police officer was now close enough to intervene. He cleared his throat to get Marcus's attention. "Excuse me, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to move along and stop harassing the guard." Marcus turned to face the officer with barely contained irritation. "Harassing? I'm just having a conversation with your tin soldier here. Is that against the law in your country?" "The Royal Guards are not permitted to engage with the public while on duty," the officer explained patiently. "You're creating a disturbance that could lead to your arrest if it continues." The threat of arrest should have deterred Marcus, but his ego was too inflated for rational thinking. He had built his entire identity around never backing down from anyone or anything. The idea of walking away felt like admitting defeat. Marcus faced a critical decision. The police officer stood waiting for his response while the crowd watched with anticipation. The Royal Guard remained motionless, but Marcus could sense tension building beneath that disciplined exterior. His fighter's instincts told him this situation was reaching a breaking point. "Officer, I understand your position," Marcus said, trying to sound reasonable while his mind raced with possibilities. "But I'm not breaking any laws by talking to someone. And technically, I haven't touched anybody or made any real threats." The police officer's expression remained professional but firm. "Sir, you're causing a public disturbance and harassing a member of Her Majesty's Guard. I'm giving you one final warning to move along peacefully." Marcus looked around at the crowd. Dozens of phones continued recording every moment. This was his chance to create viral content that would be shared millions of times across social media. The publicity would be worth more than any prize money from his fights. But he needed something dramatic to happen. "You know what, officer?" Marcus said with a theatrical gesture. "You're absolutely right. I should show more respect for your traditions here in England." The crowd began to relax, thinking the confrontation was ending peacefully. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned back toward the guard with a sly smile. "I apologize for my behavior, soldier. As a gesture of respect, I'd like to shake your hand and thank you for your service to your country." The request seemed innocent enough. Several tourists smiled at what appeared to be a peaceful resolution. Even the police officer looked relieved that the situation was de-escalating. But Sergeant Morrison sensed something wrong in Marcus's tone and body language. Marcus extended his right hand toward the guard in what looked like a genuine gesture of respect. He stepped even closer, now within arm's reach of the motionless soldier, The crowd pressed forward to get better video angles of this unexpected peaceful moment. "Come on," Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Just a quick handshake between fighters. You can break protocol for 2 seconds to show some sportsmanship, right?" Sergeant Morrison faced an impossible situation. His orders were crystal clear. Remain motionless and do not interact with the public under any circumstances. But refusing a seemingly sincere gesture of respect would make him look unreasonable to the watching crowd. Marcus kept his hand extended, waiting. His smile appeared friendly, but his eyes showed the calculating look of a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He had used similar tactics in psychological warfare before fights, lulling opponents into relaxation before launching devastating attacks. "I'm trying to show respect here." Marcus continued his performance. "The least you can do is acknowledge a peaceful gesture from a visitor to your country. Unless your training didn't include basic politeness?" The police officer watched nervously. Something felt wrong about the situation, but he couldn't identify exactly what. Marcus's words sounded reasonable, but his body language suggested hidden intentions. Sergeant Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Against his better judgment and military training, he began to move. The discipline that had kept him motionless for hours wavered under the social pressure and apparent reasonableness of Marcus's request. The crowd gasped as they watched the guard's right hand slowly start to move away from his rifle. This was unprecedented. Most tourists visited the palace multiple times without ever seeing a guard break position. The phones recorded eagerly as history seemed to be unfolding before their eyes. Marcus's heart raced with anticipation. His plan was working perfectly. Once the guard extended his hand, Marcus would grab it and demonstrate a simple takedown move. Nothing too violent. He didn't want to seriously injure the man. Just enough to prove his superiority and create an unforgettable viral moment. But as Sergeant Morrison's hand moved toward the extended handshake, years of combat experience triggered his survival instincts. Something about Marcus's posture and positioning felt like a setup. The fighter's weight distribution suggested preparation for sudden movement, not a casual handshake. At the last possible second, just before their hands would have touched, Sergeant Morrison stopped. His military training reasserted itself, overriding social pressure and embarrassment. His hand froze in midair, then slowly returned to its position on his rifle. Marcus's face showed surprise and frustration. His carefully planned moment had failed at the crucial instant. The guard had somehow sensed the trap and avoided it. Now Marcus looked foolish standing there with his hand extended while the soldier returned to his statue-like pose. "Really?" Marcus said, his friendly facade beginning to crack. "You're going to leave me hanging like that? I was trying to show you respect and you just ignore me completely?" The crowd murmured with confusion and disappointment. They had expected to witness a moment of international friendship, but instead saw what appeared to be rudeness from the guard. Several people began taking sides, with some supporting Marcus and others defending the soldier's duty to maintain discipline. Marcus realized his psychological approach wasn't working. The guard was too well trained and disciplined to fall for mind games. But Marcus's ego couldn't accept defeat. He had built his reputation on never backing down from any challenge, regardless of the circumstances. "Fine," Marcus announced to the crowd. "I tried to handle this like a gentleman. I offered respect and friendship and got nothing in return. Now we do this the hard way." The police officer stepped forward immediately. "Sir, I'm warning you one final time. Any aggressive action will result in your immediate arrest." Marcus held up his hands in a gesture of innocence. "I'm not going to hurt anybody, officer. I just want to demonstrate something to all these nice people who came here to see the famous guards." Without warning, Marcus suddenly lunged forward and grabbed the guard's shoulders with both hands. His plan was simple: pull the soldier off balance and take him to the ground using basic wrestling techniques. He expected an easy victory over someone trained only to stand still and look impressive. But Marcus had made a fatal miscalculation. Sergeant Morrison wasn't just a ceremonial guard. He was a combat veteran with years of real-world fighting experience. The moment Marcus made physical contact, all protocols and restrictions disappeared. The soldier was now authorized to defend himself using whatever force necessary. The crowd screamed as they realized the confrontation had turned physical. Phones captured every moment as the MMA champion made what would prove to be the biggest mistake of his fighting career. The moment Marcus's hands made contact with Sergeant Morrison's shoulders, everything changed in an instant. The Royal Guard's training kicked in with devastating efficiency. Years of combat experience in Afghanistan and Iraq had prepared him for exactly this type of sudden attack. Marcus expected to easily pull the guard off, balance and demonstrate his superior grappling skills to the amazed crowd. He had performed similar takedowns thousands of times in training and competition. In his mind, this would be the easiest victory of his career, a quick demonstration against someone with no real fighting experience. But Sergeant Morrison was not the ceremonial toy soldier Marcus imagined him to be. The instant he felt the American's grip on his shoulders, his body reacted with muscle memory developed through countless hours of combat training. His right hand released the rifle, allowing it to fall safely to the side, while his left hand shot upward in a lightning-fast strike. The guard's palm connected with Marcus's jaw with perfect precision and devastating force. The technique was a classic military close-quarters combat move, designed to disorient and disable attackers quickly. Marcus had never experienced anything like it in all his years of professional fighting. The crowd gasped as they watched the undefeated champion's head snap backward from the impact. Marcus's grip on the guard's shoulders immediately loosened as stars exploded across his vision. He staggered backward, completely stunned by the power and speed of the counterattack. But Sergeant Morrison wasn't finished. His combat training had taught him that hesitation in a fight could mean death. He followed up his initial strike with a devastating knee to Marcus's midsection, driving all the air from the fighter's lungs and doubling him over in pain. Marcus tried to recover his balance and composure, but the guard's assault continued with relentless efficiency. A sharp elbow strike caught him in the back of the neck, sending him crashing to his knees on the pavement. The entire sequence had taken less than 5 seconds. The crowd watched in shocked silence as their assumptions about the confrontation were completely reversed. Instead of seeing an MMA champion easily defeat a ceremonial guard, they witnessed a soldier systematically dismantling a supposed fighting expert with clinical precision. Marcus knelt on the ground, gasping for breath and trying to clear his head. Blood trickled from his split lip where the palm strike had connected. His ribs ached from the knee strike and his neck throbbed from the elbow blow. Never in his professional career had he been hurt so quickly and efficiently. Sergeant Morrison stood over the fallen fighter, no longer motionless but alert and ready for further action. His training had transformed him from a silent statue into a dangerous warrior in seconds. His eyes scanned for additional threats while keeping Marcus in sight. "Stay down," the guard commanded in a voice that carried absolute authority. "Do not attempt to get up or continue this confrontation." Marcus's ego struggled against the reality of his situation. He had built his entire identity around being unbeatable in any fight. The idea that a palace guard had just dominated him so completely was impossible for his mind to accept. He began to push himself back to his feet, determined to salvage some dignity from the encounter. "That was luck," Marcus wheezed, still struggling to breathe properly. "You caught me off guard. Let's see how you do in a real fight." The police officer who had been watching rushed forward with his radio already in hand. "All units to Buckingham Palace, we have an assault in progress." He called for backup while moving to intervene between the two men. But Marcus was beyond rational thinking. His pride had been wounded more severely than his body. He couldn't accept that his perfect record and reputation had been shattered by someone he considered a pretend soldier. With a roar of anger and humiliation, he launched himself at Sergeant Morrison again. This time the guard was ready and no longer constrained by ceremonial duties. He sidestepped Marcus's clumsy charge with ease, using the fighter's own momentum against him. A perfectly timed hip throw sent Marcus sailing through the air before he crashed hard onto the pavement. The crowd couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Several people had stopped recording, too shocked by the violence to continue. Others captured every moment, knowing they were documenting something unprecedented in Royal Guard history. Marcus lay on the ground, his expensive tracksuit torn and dirty from the impact. His gold jewelry had scattered across the pavement. The invincible champion who had entered this confrontation full of arrogance and confidence was now a broken and humiliated figure. Sergeant Morrison maintained his combat stance, ready to defend himself if necessary, but it was clear that Marcus no longer posed a significant threat. The guard's precise strikes had taken all the fight out of the American challenger. "I warned you," the police officer said as he knelt beside Marcus to check his condition. "You brought this on yourself through your own actions." Additional police officers arrived on scene within minutes, having heard the call for backup. They quickly assessed the situation and began taking statements from witnesses. The area around the palace gates was secured while medical personnel examined Marcus for serious injuries. The crowd began to disperse, many still shocked by what they had witnessed. Social media exploded as videos of the confrontation spread across platforms worldwide. Within hours, millions of people would see the moment when an undefeated MMA champion was systematically defeated by a British royal guard. Marcus gradually regained full consciousness as paramedics evaluated his condition. His vision cleared enough to see the concerned faces of medical personnel and the professional expressions of police officers. The reality of his situation began to sink in as he realized he was lying on the ground outside Buckingham Palace, defeated and humiliated. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" one of the paramedics asked while checking his pupils for signs of concussion. "Marcus Rodriguez," he mumbled through his swollen lip, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. The paramedic nodded and continued his examination. "You've taken some hard hits, but nothing appears to be permanently damaged. You'll have some bruises and soreness for a few days." As Marcus was helped to his feet, he caught sight of Sergeant Morrison. The guard had returned to his post and resumed his motionless stance. His rifle was back in position, his expression neutral. It was as if the entire confrontation had never happened, except for the torn cloth and scattered jewelry on the ground as evidence. The transformation was remarkable and deeply humbling. The same man who had just systematically defeated a professional fighter was now back to being a silent, disciplined sentry. Marcus began to understand that he had gravely underestimated both the guard's abilities and the depth of his own arrogance. Marcus stepped out of the car into the cool London morning, facing a sea of cameras and microphones. The location was painfully familiar, the same spot where his arrogance had led to his devastating defeat just days earlier. Now he returned as a humbled man, ready to acknowledge his mistakes before the world. The crowd of reporters was larger than expected. International media outlets had sent their best journalists to cover what many considered a defining moment in sports history. The story of an undefeated champion's fall from grace had captured global attention in ways Marcus never anticipated. Standing at the microphone, Marcus looked toward the palace gates where Sergeant Morrison maintained his disciplined post. The same guard who had defeated him so efficiently was back at his station, performing his duties with the same dedication and professionalism he had shown throughout his career. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice quieter and more measured than anyone had heard before. "I'm here today to apologize for my behavior and to acknowledge the serious mistakes I made during my visit to your country." The words came slowly at first, each one feeling heavy with significance. Marcus had spent his entire adult life building an image of invincibility and superiority. Tearing down that facade in public required more courage than any fight he had ever entered. "I came to London full of pride and arrogance," he continued, his eyes finding Sergeant Morrison's position. "I believed that my success in the ring made me better than other people. I was wrong, and my behavior toward Sergeant Morrison was disrespectful, inappropriate, and completely unacceptable." The crowd listened intently as Marcus took a deep breath before continuing. The rain had stopped, but the gray clouds overhead seemed to match the somber mood of his confession. "Sergeant Morrison represents everything I thought I was but never actually achieved," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "True discipline, real courage, and genuine service to something greater than himself. While I was busy promoting my own image and feeding my ego, men like him were serving their country with honor and distinction." Several reporters exchanged surprised glances. This wasn't the typical celebrity apology they had expected. Marcus seemed genuinely transformed by his experience, speaking with a sincerity that came from deep personal reflection rather than public relations coaching. "I learned that standing guard at this palace isn't ceremonial theater," Marcus continued, gesturing toward the motionless figure of Sergeant Morrison. "It requires incredible mental strength, physical conditioning, and unwavering commitment to duty. These guards are elite soldiers who have earned their positions through years of service and sacrifice. Marcus paused to collect his thoughts, knowing that his next words would be the most difficult to say. His entire career had been built on projecting strength and never admitting weakness. But the man he was becoming understood that true strength sometimes required acknowledging your failures. When Sergeant Morrison defended himself against my unprovoked attack, he demonstrated skills and discipline that I had never encountered in professional fighting, Marcus admitted, the words burning his throat but feeling necessary. He used exactly the force required to neutralize the threat I posed, nothing more and nothing less. His response was professional, controlled, and completely justified. The admission sent ripples through the crowd of reporters. For an undefeated champion to publicly acknowledge being outclassed in a fight was unprecedented in modern sports. Social media exploded with reactions as the live stream reached millions of viewers worldwide. I want to specifically apologize to Sergeant Morrison and all the Royal Guards for disrespecting their service, Marcus said, looking directly at the soldier he had confronted. You deserved honor and recognition, not mockery and aggression. I failed to show the respect that your dedication and sacrifice have earned. For the first time since Marcus began speaking, Sergeant Morrison's eyes shifted slightly. The movement was almost imperceptible, but Marcus caught it and felt a small measure of acknowledgement from the man who had taught him such a painful but valuable lesson. I also want to apologize to the people of Britain and to everyone who witnessed my behavior, Marcus continued. As a professional athlete, I have a responsibility to represent my sport and my country with dignity. I failed in that responsibility, and I understand why my actions caused offense and disappointment. The questions from reporters came quickly once Marcus finished his prepared remarks. They wanted to know about his future fighting plans, his legal situation, and whether this incident would end his career. But Marcus had thought carefully about these issues during his days of reflection. My fighting career will continue, but it needs to change, he answered honestly. I can't go back to being the person I was before this happened. That version of myself was built on false confidence and disrespect for others. I need to become someone worthy of the platform and influence that success has given me. One reporter asked whether he planned to seek a rematch with Sergeant Morrison. The question drew some nervous laughter from the crowd, but Marcus treated it with complete seriousness. Sergeant Morrison wasn't trying to prove anything or build his reputation when he defended himself, Marcus replied. He was doing his job and protecting himself from someone who posed a threat. I have nothing but respect for his actions, and any suggestion of a rematch completely misses the point of what happened here. After the press conference ended, Marcus requested a private moment near the palace gates. He approached Sergeant Morrison's position slowly and respectfully, stopping at an appropriate distance that wouldn't interfere with the guard's duties. Sergeant Morrison, Marcus said quietly, knowing the soldier could hear him, even if protocol prevented a response. I know you can't acknowledge me while on duty, but I want you to know that you taught me something more valuable than any trainer ever has. Thank you for showing me what real strength and discipline look like. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, then placed a small envelope at the base of the guard post. Inside was a handwritten letter expressing his gratitude and respect, along with a donation to a military charity in Sergeant Morrison's name. He walked away without looking back, knowing that this chapter of his life was finally closed. The flight back to Los Angeles gave Marcus time to plan his future. He would return to training and competition, but with a completely different mindset. His next fights would be about testing himself and entertaining fans, not about proving superiority over others. He began planning changes to his training regimen that would include discipline and mental conditioning, not just physical preparation. Months later, when Marcus returned to the octagon, fans and commentators noticed immediate differences in his behavior. He showed respect for his opponents, thanked his team publicly, and acknowledged the contributions of everyone who supported his career. His fighting style remained aggressive and effective, but it was tempered with sportsmanship and humility. The viral videos of his defeat and subsequent apology became teaching tools in military academies and sports psychology courses. His story demonstrated how quickly arrogance could lead to downfall, but also how personal growth was possible even after public humiliation. Marcus never forgot the lesson taught by Sergeant Morrison outside Buckingham Palace. The Royal Guard had shown him that true strength came from discipline, service, and respect for others. These qualities became the foundation of Marcus's rebuilt character and continued success. In quiet moments, Marcus would sometimes think about that gray morning in London when everything changed. He had gone seeking easy fame and viral content, but instead found something far more valuable: the humility and wisdom necessary to become a better man. The defeat that seemed like his lowest moment had actually become the beginning of his greatest victory. The police officers finished taking statements from witnesses and reviewing the video evidence captured by dozens of phones. The situation was clear-cut from a legal perspective. Marcus had initiated physical contact with a royal guard who had been peacefully performing his duties. Sergeant Morrison's response was entirely justified as self-defense. "Mr. Rodriguez," the lead officer addressed Marcus formally, "you're under arrest for assault on a member of Her Majesty's Guard and causing a public disturbance." The words hit Marcus like another physical blow. Being arrested had never been part of his plan. He had imagined viral fame and increased respect for his fighting abilities. Instead, he faced criminal charges in a foreign country and the most humiliating defeat of his life. As handcuffs were placed on his wrists, Marcus watched Sergeant Morrison maintaining his disciplined stance. The guard's breathing had returned to normal, showing no signs of the brief but intense confrontation. His uniform was barely wrinkled, while Marcus looked like he had been hit by a truck. The crowd that remained began taking final photos and videos as Marcus was led toward a police van. His expensive designer clothes were torn and dirty. His carefully styled hair was disheveled. Blood from his split lip had stained his shirt. The contrast between his earlier confident appearance and current defeated state was stark and undeniable. During the ride to the police station, Marcus had time to think about what had just happened. The physical pain was manageable. He had endured worse injuries during training sessions. But the psychological damage was devastating. His entire identity had been built around being an unbeatable fighter, and that foundation had crumbled in less than a minute. The holding cell at the police station gave Marcus more time for uncomfortable reflection. He sat on the hard bench replaying the confrontation in his mind. Every decision he had made seemed foolish in hindsight. His arrogance had blinded him to obvious warning signs about the guard's true capabilities. Hours passed before Marcus was allowed to make phone calls. His first call went to his manager in Los Angeles, who was shocked to hear about the arrest and defeat. Within minutes, the manager was coordinating with lawyers and public relations experts to handle the crisis. "The videos are everywhere, Marcus," his manager said during their conversation. "This is going to be a public relations nightmare. Every major sports website and news outlet is covering the story." Marcus closed his eyes and leaned against the cold wall of the holding cell. He had wanted fame and viral videos, but not like this. The footage showed him being systematically defeated by someone he had mocked and underestimated. His reputation as an invincible champion was destroyed forever. The next morning brought a preliminary court hearing where Marcus learned the full extent of his legal troubles. The assault charges were serious, carrying potential jail time and hefty fines. His lawyer, flown in from London's most prestigious law firm, advised pleading guilty to avoid a lengthy trial that would generate even more negative publicity. Outside the courthouse, reporters and photographers waited in large numbers. Marcus's story had become international news, not for his fighting prowess, but for his spectacular defeat and arrest. The headlines were brutal and unforgiving, describing him as an arrogant bully who got his comeuppance from a disciplined soldier. Back at his hotel that evening, Marcus finally had privacy to watch the videos that had spread across social media. Seeing himself being defeated so comprehensively was almost unbearable. The footage clearly showed his aggressive behavior, his taunting of the guard, and his decision to initiate physical contact. But what struck him most was watching Sergeant Morrison's response. The guard's movements were precise, efficient, and completely controlled. There was no anger or malice in his actions, just professional competence in neutralizing a threat. The soldier had used exactly the amount of force necessary and no more. Marcus began researching the Royal Guards online, learning information he should have discovered before his confrontation. He discovered that guards were selected from elite military regiments and had extensive combat experience. Many had served in dangerous conflict zones around the world. Their ceremonial duties represented just one aspect of their military careers. Reading about Sergeant Morrison's background was particularly humbling. The man had 3 combat tours, multiple commendations for bravery and advanced training in several martial arts. His ability to remain motionless for hours demonstrated incredible mental discipline, not weakness as Marcus had assumed. The legal proceedings continued for several days while Marcus remained in London. His lawyer negotiated a plea agreement that would allow him to avoid jail time in exchange for a substantial fine, community service, and a public apology. The terms were humiliating but necessary to resolve the situation quickly. During this time, Marcus had numerous opportunities to reflect on his behavior and its consequences. The constant media attention forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself. His arrogance and sense of superiority had led him to disrespect someone who deserved honor and recognition for his service. The public apology was scheduled to take place at the same location where the confrontation had occurred. Marcus would have to return to Buckingham Palace, face the media, and acknowledge his mistakes in front of the world. The thought terrified him more than any opponent he had ever faced in the ring. The night before the apology, Marcus couldn't sleep. He paced around his hotel room, practicing what he would say. The words felt foreign and difficult after years of constant self-promotion and boasting. Admitting weakness and error went against every instinct he had developed as a professional fighter. But as dawn approached, Marcus realized that this apology represented more than just a legal requirement. It was an opportunity to begin rebuilding himself as a better person. The defeat had stripped away his false confidence and arrogance, revealing the insecure and fearful man underneath. He thought about Sergeant Morrison's discipline and professionalism. The guard had shown true strength by maintaining his composure under extreme provocation. He had demonstrated real courage by standing his ground despite verbal abuse and mockery. These were qualities Marcus admired but had never developed in himself. The morning of the apology arrived with gray London skies and light rain. Marcus dressed in a simple black suit, having abandoned his flashy jewelry and designer clothes. He looked different, humbled and subdued rather than cocky and aggressive. The change was visible to everyone who saw him. As his car approached Buckingham Palace, Marcus could see the crowds of reporters and photographers waiting for him. This would be one of the most difficult moments of his life, but also potentially one of the most important. How he handled the situation would determine whether he could learn from his mistakes or remain trapped by his ego and pride.